Thank you for tuning into today's webinar. We're excited to get started momentarily, but while we're waiting for everybody to file into the room, could you please put into the chat why you're here, what you're interested in learning, what brings you here? We would love to get a sense of why people are in there. Just pop it into the chat. We'll be watching that chat throughout the entire session today. So go ahead and start discussing now so that you get your brain ready for today's topic. Today's webinar, of course, is Leaving No One Behind in the Energy Transition, brought to you by the BEC Conference, Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change. Hello from Atlanta. Yes, hi, Pam. I'll start. Hello from DC. So just pop into the chat why you're here. Yep. Chairwoman of EAC, looking for ways to address equity issues in the energy transition. Excellent. And Nancy says, hi, everyone. Looking forward to just learning. Chase is from Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, looking to learn about equitable work and engaging folks. Hello, Therese, always a pleasure. Interested in BEC infusing this kind of work into climate matters. More from Neep. All right, so welcome everybody, and we're going to get started now. My name is Ruben Sussman. I'm a co-chair of the BEC conference. I happen to work for the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, or ACEEE, directing the Behavior and Human Dimensions program. But I do want to point out that, of course, BEC is brought to you by three convening organizations, ACEEE, CIE, and Stanford. So this year's BEC theme is Engaging All Voices. And I just want to take a moment to remind everyone that the early bird deadline is the end of this month. So pop over to the website and register before August 1st, because prices are going to go up. Now, just one more note about this year's BEC conference. It's a little weird, so I like to talk about this every time we have a webinar. We're going to have a virtual opening day. It's totally virtual on November 9th. We have some great content for that. And then once you've got your juices flowing and you're thinking about behavior, energy, and climate change, we're going to meet in person. And you're going to see all those folks, well, many of those folks that you saw online in person in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol Hilton, where we'll have a more traditional BEC conference, circa 2019. So you'll see all your friends and strangers, friends that you haven't met yet there. Now, of course, we want to draw special attention to our sponsors for the BEC conference and these webinars. They wouldn't happen without them. And I wanted to add to this list Loom, which is sponsoring a nonprofit or equity organization to come, and MyHeat, which have just come on as another exhibitor sponsor. So thank you to our sponsors. We really appreciate your help. So in terms of logistics, please remain muted during the session, but you can always use the chat, as we talked about, and many of you are already going through that, so you know how to use it. That's great. We'll monitor that for discussions and questions. We'll have time for questions at the end of both presentations. We'll have a sort of frank and open, interesting discussion about this work after the two presentations. And at that time, we will ask you, if you're interested, to actually unmute yourself and turn on your camera to ask questions if that's what you're interested in. It'll really make the discussion richer, and we're excited about that. So without further ado, let's turn it over to today's webinar panelists and speakers. We're going to talk about leaving no one behind in the energy transition. Pamela Phan is our first speaker, founder and CEO of Integrated Solutions, LLC. And we're very excited she's come on board as this year's BEC Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisor. We also have with us, we're very lucky, Jasmine Johnson, the president of SPARROW Energy Services. So thank you so much to our speakers, and I'd love to turn it over to both of you now.
Thank you, Ruben. Appreciate it. And thank you for having us here today. And thank you, Jasmine, for joining us. So I'm going to share my screen to do this presentation, but I will tell you that, the main reason I wanted us to have this time with y'all was to really have a conversation about leaving no one behind in the energy transition. I personally did this presentation at the Midwest Renewable Energy Conference a couple of months ago. And it seems as if all the conferences I've been to since then have had a particular focus on how do we ensure that people aren't left behind in the energy transition. So I'm like, it's exactly what I was talking about a couple of months ago, but I'm glad people are paying attention. I'm glad the discussions are happening, because without the discussions, we're not able to actually do the work. So 1 second, let me see if I can share here. Bear with me, y'all. For some reason, I'm not able to share. Are you still sharing at the moment, Reuven? Because it says one participant can share at a time.
I'm not, but maybe Nick at ACEEE can help sort that out.
Nick, can you help us? It's not giving me the.
Doesn't look like it's.
Okay, let me try. Yeah. Don't we love technical issues? This worked absolutely fine.
I was like 5 minutes ago.
It worked absolutely fine 5 minutes ago. Now I'm hitting share screen and it's just giving me other weird options.
Here, let me see if I can share for you real quick.
Thank you.
I've got your slides on my end.
Oh, there we go. Appreciate that. So I hate having to do that. Next slide, please. But leaving no one behind in the energy transition. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we know that the energy industry is one of the fastest growing industries in the US. And if we look at, the jobs reports that were published, we can see that there's a steady growth continue to happen in this industry, especially for clean energy jobs. We have a retiring workforce, and then there's all these new sectors that are coming up. But, we have to figure out how to effectively engage with communities and diverse communities who have typically not been a part of this industry, who don't know a lot about the jobs in this industry. Not only that, I think through community investments, we have to actually start thinking about how we make right on some environmental justice wrongs that have been happening. And we think about those wrongs. We can't talk about, environmental justice if we don't talk about systemic racism and environmental justice and energy equity, economic stability, as well as empowerment and wealth building upon these communities. And so we're not just talking about a business here, and we're not just talking about an industry, but at the end of the day, we're truly talking about people and how we impact people with the work that we do. Next slide. Thank you. So when we talk about environmental justice, I think it's been, a key word now that a lot of people are tapping into and speaking about. But what we're talking about is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Some of us may or may not know that a lot of the legislative work that is coming down now, especially with a lot of the grants, are focusing on environmental justice communities, or what you'll see as EJC or EJ communities. So this just kind of gives you a reference to what that is. And so I kind of took out there like the fair treatment part, right? That means no group of people should bear disproportionate share of negative environmental consequences. But we know that there is a disproportionate amount of people, and typically it's in communities of color that share the burden of this. Communities of color typically are less to have the impact of whether it be carbon offset or environmental issues, but they're the ones who take on the burden of this. And so we have to think of how to one, carefully, equitably bring communities along this journey of how we actually, correct these things. Meaningful involvement means people have the opportunity to participate in the decisions that may affect their environment. So that means people like the ones who are on this call today, you and I, people who are in leadership positions. you need to involve, speaking to community activists, speaking to nonprofit organizations or those in communities so they can have a decision in how the choices that we make are going to impact their lives. Public's contribution can influence the regulatory agency's decision. Community concerns will be considered in the decision-making process, and that we will seek out to facilitate involvement of those who will be affected. And so I think that was real important to call that out because many times, and it goes without saying that, there aren't a lot of people of color and people from these communities in leadership positions. And those are the people who are typically the decision makers, the ones who are in the rooms. If you're in a room full of people that look like you, more than likely you're suffering from you're suffering from a particular kind of bias that it enables you or disables you from making just decisions. And so you have to think through how to do that differently. If your network looks like you, if the people you're having the conversations about your work look like you, you need to extend your network and bring some other people into the conversation. I did put a link here on the screen. Maybe you guys can go to that, but this is the EJ tool, the screening tool that the EPA put together. I think it's a very good tool. I also know that there are some communities and some cities and some states that may have their own mapping tools that they use as well. And also many nonprofits use their own mapping tools to share who they're disadvantaged or underserved, whatever keyword people are using now. I know we go back and forth with those as well, but I think that you can look into any of those tools to be able to see where in your community or where in the states that you're doing work are being hit the hardest and where they probably need the most help. Next slide, please. So some of the things I want to talk about are the approaches to community investment, workforce development, some core concerns, barriers to workforce development and collaborating, and successful conditions for workforce development programs. Next, please. So approaches to community investment. So this is, when I speak about leaving no one behind, I'm thinking of it in a twofold. One of those is community investment. How are we going to ensure that communities are being brought along? We've got, some of the worst, especially in the Southeast, some of the worst housing stock out here. Building codes are not up to par. Building codes, even, adopting building codes takes years. Many of you on this call know and have, either fought for those causes, or have worked really hard to get some of those things changed. But one is enacting policies that protects communities. Everything to me starts at nothing can change without policy changes. We can do work here and there. We can put our resources and funding into programs for weatherization, to build homes up, to get communities whole. But if policies were enacted to ensure that this got done, it will get done. So we need those policy people who are engaged in that work to be fighting for communities, to make sure that communities are being seen and that their needs are being met. When we think about climate change and how climate change disproportionately affects minority people. And you'll find that, if you look at that EJ mapping tool and you look and identify where the problem lies, is typically minority communities. We have to figure out what policies will best serve minority communities as well. And weatherization, electrification, those are two ways that we can also look at how we bring communities along. We know that weatherization projects, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of talks around, well, who's going to fund it? There's so many communities. The problem is so big. It is a big problem. It's a huge problem. You have communities that if you identify, you can go do energy audits. You can identify that, yes, this home is it needs to be weatherized. It's a bad home. You've got leaky windows, bad windows, you need insulation, but they also need a new roof. Who wants to pay for the new roof? Nobody. Nobody's taking responsibility. And is it the responsibility? Whose responsibility is it? Is it just the homeowner who likely doesn't have the funding to do so? Is it the utility, which I don't think is solely on the utility? But I think that if we all work together to look for solutions to be able to do some of these projects, I think that they're there for us. Why don't we bring in, and I know I've been in several conversations with many of you on the phone today, talking about, insurance companies also being a part of this conversation. When you have a healthy home or when you have an unhealthy home and you have a person that's suffering from breathing issues like any COPD issues, or you have a child that has asthma and has asthmatic issues because the home is unhealthy, that makes it worse, and you have trips to the emergency room, which then parents are taking off of work, which then some may have to take several days off of work, and which then they might be let go of their job because they had to take care of this medical emergency with their child. Why can't we get insurance companies more involved in this work and figure out a way? We really have to take a holistic approach to community engagement. That's really my point, and that's what I'm getting at. It's not solely relying upon the utilities. It's not relying upon these implementers. It's not relying upon the government. I think holistically, we have to learn how to take care of each other and how to approach this in a different way. The ways that we've been doing it haven't been working. So we have to really think of it in a holistic way. Second is the electrification. Many of you, I saw at the 4th electrification conference recently, a lot of that communication in the conference about leaving no one behind in the electrification transition. That means ensuring that communities have awareness around what's happening in this industry, what's happening with, are we going to be able to do successfully plan out multifamily housing, electric charging stations? Are we able to successfully ensure that we're utilizing environmental justice community as hubs for community awareness, understanding where is their community connection? How do we make them aware of electric cars? We all know that we have several, but actually I take that back. There's not several organizations that are focused on minority awareness around EVs. There's 1 or 2 that are focused around minority education around EVs. That has to change. That has to change, because what happens if it doesn't? And some of these communities get left behind as we're transitioning. That's unjust. That's unjust. So we have to think of building out in our planning process, what's the best way to do this? Companies are now charged with the diverse spend, right? Sometimes 25% of contracts or less have to go to diverse companies or be focused towards looking at diversity. That's wrong, y'all. I'm sorry. It just is 25% or less. And while I'll help you plan out that 25% or less and strategically a plan on how to put that into communities where it will matter, we should all be thinking about this in our work. It should come top of mind. It should not be, oh, we have to focus this amount or else nobody's going to focus on it. This is why we're having these conversations. It's so important that we talk about this because it is a big issue. Next slide, please. Thank you. And let's talk a little bit about workforce development. Next. Educating, advancing, and partnering. Keep those educating, advancing, and partnering. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm sorry, I was at the end. So let me go back. Can you go back real quick so I can hit my points of that? So educating. I'm going to be introducing SPARROW Energy, and Jasmine's going to talk a little bit about some of the work they're doing in educating. But educating is ensuring that communities are aware of the possibilities in this industry, whether that be for entrepreneurship and or for workforce. I cannot tell you guys enough about how many workforce development committees, how many diversity committees that I've sat on, where people are like, we just don't know where to find the workers. We don't know where y'all are at. Like, seriously, they don't know where we're at. We have to start really paying attention on how to build successful workforce development programming. That includes educating people about the opportunities in this industry, advancing people who are currently in roles within organizations, and ensuring that you see more people of color and more advancement within this work. Because again, it goes back to the decision making, right? Who's making decisions for communities and people if everybody in the room looks like you? So advancing people of color into positions of power and leadership positions where they can make effective decisions for people that look like them. I cannot tell you how much representation matters. If we have not learned anything from the last election with Kamala being, named vice president, if we haven't learned anything with Ketanji Brown Jackson being named on Supreme Court, when people tell you representation matters, it absolutely matters. So if we don't see leaders in this industry and people who look like us making decisions for people who look like us, it's going to be really hard to advance our work. And partnering. Who are you partnering with to advance your work, to advance this work? What local, again, that holistic approach that I just mentioned. Are you working with nonprofits who are already doing the work? Are you working with the nonprofits who are work agencies, work development agencies, employment agencies in hard to reach or environmental justice communities? Are you working with them? Are you working with business partners who have a focus on workforce development and ensuring that they're developing people who actually look like them to come in and do this work? So who are you working with? Think about your partnerships and your alliances and how you're putting forth your agenda. One of the things I'd like for you all to remember is that about 2 years ago, George Floyd was murdered. And many of these organizations and your organizations made commitments to diversity. They made commitments to do better within their organizations and to work better externally in helping minority communities. Let's start holding our leadership and holding our work to those commitments that we made. Let's start doing that and actually putting the work forward, because the alternative that if we start leaving people behind as we're starting to make these decisions now is not going to be successful. It's not going to be successful. So we have to start thinking about it now and where this work leads and who we're engaging through this work. So that's what I will leave you with in my discussion. I hope y'all have some comments and want to have this discussion with me. In the meantime, write your comments in the chat. Again, let's talk about it. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to what did I call you? Jasmine. I'm gonna turn it over to Jasmine to talk a little bit about SPARROW. And then, but let me say this before Jasmine comes on. I wanted to have a minority business participate in this discussion. I also invited some people from government agencies, and unfortunately their schedules didn't allow them to come, but they wanted so deeply to have this conversation. When I tell you that everyone's talking about this and trying to think of ways that we can connect in this space is very important. So I hate that they couldn't be here, but I wanted to bring in particular Jasmine because she is a minority business owner in this space. And I know that she can talk to some of the challenges, the highs and lows. Like we're really going to have a conversation in a minute here, y'all, to talk about why it's so important to build minority partnerships in this work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jasmine.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. I will share my screen now as well. And can you see that? Excellent. As Pam said, thank you so very much for having me here, but also for the work that you're doing. It's important. And I know that everyone here appreciates it, and it will go on to affect generations. So thank you so much for that work that you are doing, period. I will start and give you a little bit of information about Sparrow Energy Services. And along the way, I'll throw in a few other things that to hit on what Pam has already mentioned, but then at the end, we'll get into the real actual dialogue and conversation. So Sparrow Energy Services is an energy efficiency program implementer. We have, our executive team has over 30 years of experience in the energy industry, and these are some of the partners we have touched in the industry. We are women-owned, minority-owned, small and women business as well. And we do qualify for a few other certifications. So we are here in this diversity space and have lived it. We do truly live it. We have a approach that is a local presence with a national reach. So we do work across the nation, but we do impact the local economies by hiring locally as well. Our current services are employee placement. So that is similar to the traditional energy efficiency program implementation. However, we have learned that a better approach is to integrate the employees directly with the partners so that they can truly be a part of the team. So that is where the employee placement comes in. Product distribution, and so this ranges from things simple as light bulbs, energy efficiency light bulbs, to electric vehicle chargers through our partners. Then we have our electric vehicle charging solution. So this is turnkey. In this electric vehicle, EV world, we know that this is a evolving market. It's the wild, wild west. And so we do offer turnkey solutions, but also let it be a la carte. So whatever the client needs at that time and whatever they're looking for. And lastly is our training. We do emphasize D&I in EV, like Pam had talked about. And an example of that, so again, this is the snowflake effect. So we approach every single person. We have to very individually and say, what are your unique needs? Currently working with cities and states and counties to electrify their cities or counties, saying, what does it look like if we just install? Do you want an entire system? What does the future look like? Are you going to electrify your fleet, your buses, your public transportation? And then creating that plan for them, working with the grants to help them along that path, and just being there every step of the way, and primarily education, as that is what they are in need of. Also, I'll go back, this is a good point. So while Pam was talking about let no person be left behind, we're not leaving communities behind in this industry and in electrification. We are sending out pilots to utility companies as a way to pilot programs for EV to help to mitigate this, to help to eliminate the barriers that exist in entering into the EV market. And so different solutions, the solution that we're providing is just thinking outside of the box. And so working with different partners, we are suggesting that companies, that the counties, utility, whoever it is, that they work with us and do a leasing program. So they lease the actual charging stations, and then they also get a profit share. And this way, it is free and pays for itself within 1 year. If there is a charge, the charge would be at least $100. But then this almost completely eliminates the barrier to entry into electrification. This gives more information about the services that we offer in EV, but then workforce development as well. We talked about the training. So we have 3 different portions of training. And so DEI, that is where we use our partners, Pam, to come in and talk, do everything that she's doing now, do what she is trained to do. We have partnered with the American Institute of Building Science to conduct our BPI classes, and those are primarily our highest classes are healthy homes, as well as our quality control inspectors and other professional trainings that we do as well. These are just showing you some of the trainings that we offer as well on the BPI and science side. And this is important for us to do in these communities to help to build this pipeline, to introduce them to this industry. This is showing just our leadership and who we are. And so as you can see here, the leadership. When we go to these different conferences, we are normally the minority. Actually, we always are. So it's, you can see that here. While being in the industry, we said, you know what? We see this gap. We see a number of them, racial, age, and gender. We want to do something to solve this problem. So thus was birthed the SPARROW Foundation. And so the SPARROW Foundation, it is a 501c3 dedicated to eliminating the racial, age, and gender gap that exists in the energy industry. Our organization, it gives out grants as well as conducts programming. These are a few images that just show some of the camps. So we'll partner with local corporations, utilities, as you can see in this photo, and we'll show kids, we'll do college tours and show them different jobs in these STEM industries, and just this is truly what you could do. We get corporate sponsorships from local businesses as well to truly and show that students, this is the wide ecosystem around you. We have a number of goals that are expansive, and we are excited. As we took this mission one step further, we said, how can we? And it was the brainchild of our Dawn, you saw her on the slide as well, and she, our VP of strategy, and she said, why don't we interview all of these minorities in the industry and STEM, in STEM, starting with energy, but in STEM, and tell their stories. We want little kids to see what Pam does, hear her story, hear where she's from. Oh, Oklahoma, I'm from Oklahoma. Wait, she does what? I've never heard of that. And then truly be exposed to all of the possibilities out there. And not only will this allow them to have access to these different careers, but then change these generational economics of their situation. So generational wealth is what we hope to encourage. So with I See Myself, this is our career guide for kids. And it is career mapping, career exposure, and career curriculum. It is three main components of it, but here you can see there will be the interviews where you're learning about it, seeing and getting exposure, seeing what is their everyday life. What is this job? Actually, I've never heard of a venture capitalist. Then career mapping, I'll go a little bit into that, but that just shows you step by step what would need to be done, what schools offer it, if it's a certification, not college, but truly the roadmap on how to obtain that particular career. And then curriculum. So that can range from traditional curriculum to simulations on learning about those career fields. Working with partners, this is just a larger image showing that career mapping and how we would use it to show the kids, this is how much money you could make, this is the career, etc. These are the different steps and how to get there. So thank you so very much for allowing me to show you a little bit of what we're doing in our efforts to try to address some of the issues that we've seen. And we're here to hear all of the solutions. So thank you so much. We're excited for the conversation.
Thank you, Jasmine. And so you guys see that there are people in the industry who care about this work and who want us to actually make an impact on in these communities with this work that we do. I'm sure some of your organizations are doing some of the same things, but I really was impressed by SPARROW's efforts to dive into communities that look like us and actually try and get students engaged with thinking about what roles there could be in this industry for them. So that's one way of workforce development, is working with, of course, K through 12 to do it. The other part of workforce development is thinking through those who are either displaced in the in the industry right now or in other industries who may have transferable skills and getting them trained in this industry, people from environmental justice communities and working through workforce plans there. I saw a couple of great comment from Ben Jordan about using your local workforce development board. Yes, that is one way to do it and to engage with others as well. But I really want us to talk more about some solutions and what we can do to move this forward so it doesn't get lost and so people don't get lost. And one of the things I love that Jasmine said is that many of these students that she's training and many of the people in these environmental justice communities that we're talking about, these jobs and these roles could mean economic stability for their families. Not only that, it could be wealth building and actually change the trajectory of their lives and their families' lives if they're given the opportunity to learn a new skill or trade. We really have to start thinking about, this in terms of people. It's honestly less about the numbers and the kilowatt hours being saved. And I know that the business sense in me knows that we do have to care about those things as well, right? But behind every number, we're talking about people. We're talking about people and possibly through energy transition, being able to transform people's lives, whether that's making them healthier homes, healthier people, healthier kids, whether it's giving them the opportunity to be a part of the transition with EV adoption and, transforming cities in small towns and places where people live and bringing and electrifying their grid. I mean, that could be wonderful, right? Or it could mean bringing them jobs to do this transition. And so there's so many ways that we can be able to do that. And I know before I ask you questions, Jasmine, I want to see if Reuben, did you have any questions from the chat?
Thanks. First of all, both excellent presentations, and thank you for bringing such an interesting topic to life. So there are a few questions for Jasmine, very specifically from the name, I'm sorry if I butcher this, Tinku Kanwalker. Does the Sparrow Foundation give grants to municipalities trying to implement workforce development in marginalized communities? I know that Ben Jacobs suggests that using the U.S. Department of Labor for those grants. Do you have any guidance on that, Jasmine?
And in the specific question was, does the Sparrow Foundation offer grants to municipalities? Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah, so we're agnostic to who we give our grants to. We know we're not trying to recreate the wheel. So that is why we added that portion. We said, you know what? We see that you're doing great. Let us help you to further the mission that we both share.
And relatedly, is Sparrow's career mapping, this is also from Tinku, is Sparrow's career mapping and career curriculum available online?
It's not yet. It will be Q1 2023.
Okay, great. There's also just a point from Christopher Flynn suggesting that they're building a partnership. I'm not sure which organization he's working with, but they're building a partnership with We Care USA, wearecasa.org in order to reach the Latin communities in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. So I think that's a cool initiative. And Susan Norris just generally suggests that agreed with Pamela's earlier point about how children missing from school due to asthma or air quality issues is a real impact for schools funding as well. Parents missing money, children missing education, schools missing funding, hospitals socializing is a cost to others. So there's a huge benefit to treating the whole home. And so Susan just wanted to echo that. Sorry, there's a few other questions coming in, but Pamela, do you want to now ask a few questions to get the discussion started?
So Jasmine, one was the career, going back into that career mapping. I think that is such an excellent tool because most kids, as we know, young people, they want to know how much money am I going to make? What kind of car can I drive?
Exactly.
So that's what it is. So that career mapping tool is going to really be able to show them, like, if you go and you become a master electrician, like, I think had I known that in high school, or like some kids that I known that if they started their career as an electrician in high school, and once they graduated, how much money they could be making.
Exactly.
Like, but they think, you know, and we're talking about kids in environmental justice communities, like where their idea of making it is to become, you know, honestly, a rapper or a ball player or an athlete. But that's not everybody's journey, and it's not realistic for everyone. So giving them this tool is like amazing.
Absolutely. And it's just truly about the knowledge. We have to educate them, because the thing is, you can still have your passions. We just need to inform them. Like, what is a sound engineer for NASA? What is that? What do they even do? You know, or a venture capitalist, or it does not matter. I can list a number of them, but to not know what they do, or I think they do something with money. And then also to educate the children to say, okay, you love basketball. Okay, great. Okay, you didn't make it to the NBA. No problem. Have you thought about tech, working in a sports, you know, working for the organization, but doing a tech product? Okay, you love music. You didn't get signed to any record label. Have you thought about being a sound engineer? There's, you know, so just truly opening them up to all of the many possibilities, but they just don't know. So they could be steered in that direction if they knew. And the reality is that what we're relying on right now, the status quo right now, is family and friends, number one. What do my parents do? What do the people I know do? Okay, she works in a call center. She works at, it doesn't matter, but whatever my family does, he's a police officer. I know what their jobs are. I see them, I got it. And then also then the network around them, if that's the guidance counselor or the teachers, but that's their circle. This is who I personally know. And that's why I encouraged you to do this, because I know about it as your guidance counselor, because my uncle does it. And I've seen something in you that sparked it. I thought of you, and I encourage you to go that way. Those are both small segments, and it's a wide world out there. So yes, our goal is to educate them on all of the possibilities.
You said network. That brings me back to the network. Remember, I mentioned earlier, y'all, if your network is only you know, consisted of those that you see around you, then you have to extend your network, because it's not big enough, because that does kind of give you that sight blindedness of what's actually available out there, or what you can actually do. And that holds true for diversity as well. Diversify that network if you have not, with kids. But I wanted to ask you too about being a minority business owner in the energy industry. What do you find are some of your biggest challenges in being a minority business owner?
Biggest challenges. Great question. And I also have I spoke about her earlier, but our VP Dawn, she's on the call as well. So Dawn, if I leave anything out, please feel free to join in. The biggest challenges, I would say that our largest, I'm going to take largest off, challenges that are top of mind, I think would be it's a mix, it's a dichotomy of emotions and instructions. So the utility companies, like you said, they are requiring this. So they're saying, come on, we have to get our diverse spend. So that sounds good. That seems like that would be a benefit. However, because it is required, I think that takes away some of the the genuineness that would have originally come if we were just going to partner anyway, because I value, like you said, I value your opinions. I think you have a perspective. So I think it devalues it, but I know it's beneficial.
Right.
Then, because it's required as well, you said 25% or less, I think then the biggest problem is the opportunities that are available. So we may get an opportunity, but it's extremely small because we've been partnered with. So we're getting, there's say it's $1 million, and because we did not just get that contract, we're partnering. So now our contract is maybe 400,000. And so it squeezes us. And I think that might be the largest problem, are those two.
Yeah, and that reminds me of, I hate that word and I can't even think of it now, where companies used to have to require to put Black people in positions. What is, y'all?
Was it affirmative action?
Affirmative action. So it's almost like an affirmative action thing that, that they're requiring, but they have to do that because without that being there, with diversity, you have to be very intentional. And I talk about this all the time. You have to be very intentional about being diverse or incorporating diversity into your work. Because if everybody is not top of mind for everyone. And that doesn't mean that that's necessarily a bad thing. It just means it is what it is. And so my role is to make it, top of mind for everyone. Like once you have built that cultural competency within yourself or within your organization, you can't help but to see it in your work and what you do, and help but to want to be more culturally competent. So yeah, thank you for that. And I think that, also as a minority business owner in this space, I think that while Jasmine's right, like we don't get as many of the first tier one opportunities that come up, because it's like you have to work twice as hard just to get to the table to say I deserve the opportunity. And then once you get to the table, sometimes you don't have the support needed to succeed as they would have given another company. And I think that that's also a big challenge. And I'm thinking through this workforce development work and how all of our companies are going to be really focused on doing that. Building up the support around your minority-owned business partners, as well as the partners that they bring in, the partners that they bring in. Yes, we're all helping you meet your 25%, but you also have to help support the work that they're doing. You're going to be seeing a lot of minority businesses come into this space. Some of them, they're not going to have the longevity as SPARROW has had in the industry. But you have to be willing to give opportunities, and you have to be also willing then to also give that support to ensure that they do well. So giving the opportunity is not enough. Right. Giving the opportunity is not enough. You have to have a vested interest to make sure that these minority businesses succeed as well. So I think that that's an important point. What time do we have?
Go on, and just one more point for that. I think that a lot of the rhetoric is that it's a handout. It is, okay, well, let's help them. Or why do I have to help them? This is a business. And I think that's where we have to go all the way back to the beginning of what you just said, where we're looking, it's the systematic, it's history and what has happened to get a group of people wherever they are. And so it's righting a wrong. Yeah. If that makes sense. And so we truly need to change the thought process to where it's not that you're just helping them out. Well, we didn't get that, or whatever these thoughts are.
Yep. I mean, and you almost said it, and I call it like it is, and it's still systemic racism within this industry that has to change, that we have to call awareness to it. So if people can acknowledge that this is where we are and that there's still a problem, we can't get past it until we acknowledge it. So it is still systemic racism, and whether we're doing that in communities where we're not bringing communities along in the transition, or whether we're doing that with businesses that are in this industry and not bringing them along in the transition, is still what it is. And I think we have to acknowledge that in order to really want to make change. We've got 10 minutes left. I want to be able to open the conversation. So if there's anyone who'd like to join Jasmine and I in this conversation, please raise your hand and let us know your thoughts, or if you have any additional questions. And I do see a couple of other comments there, Reuven, if no one's raised their hand, in case someone wants to.
And I see Fabian has raised his hand. I just want to, before we get to Fabian's question, I just wanted to note that I'm not sure it's George or Jorge Moreno asks, do you have any successful models for upskilling in these communities? Jasmine, I think that's more your domain. Is there a model for like getting people skilled that seems to be working?
And so specifically with training, or talking about the kids in the pipeline, or work in the communities?
You know, I'm not sure what Mr. Moreno had in mind, but it seems to me like there might be issues with getting people to, he's
In the
saying energy sector.
Yeah.
Does that clarify for you?
I think he means training, like training and
How do you
developing.
get people, to want this training, to go through with it, to actually increasing that workforce capacity?
Yeah. So I don't have any case studies right now that I can say, yep, this is it. I remember 2003, this is what we did. But what I know has worked, what are the best practices that we're creating, is that we are working with the community development. We're working with the agencies that are, career development. So working with the municipalities, the people that are in the system that are saying, hey, I need help. I'd like to change jobs. I'm looking for a job. So these people in unemployment. So working with those departments, letting them know, hey, we're here. And what we do with our training is that we provide it's the full circle, it's the full circle of training. So we're really not just training people. We are not just certifying them, we're giving them the skills, the knowledge, and then those job specific skills. And so just letting them know, and then connecting them with workforce development. So ideally, getting them, training them, and then getting them a job. So those are the things that we've seen that's happened and that are working.
Excellent, thank you. And so I guess we'll go to the phones, so to speak. This is new in the Beck webinar world. Fabian, could you unmute yourself? And you can turn on your camera as well if you feel inclined.
Yes, hello.
And we can't hear you. Maybe you can turn up your volume a little bit, or?
Can you hear me now?
It's quite quiet. Let's give it another try here, Fabian, if you can unmute.
Are you able to hear me? I'm so sorry. I can
Fabian,
That's a little better. We can kind of hear you. I guess if everyone else is quiet.
we'll repeat the question.
Okay. Okay, is that any better? Oh no. I'll put my question in the chat. I'm sorry.
I can hear you, Fabian.
We can hear you. We can hear you when you speak loudly. Go ahead.
Okay, my question was for Jasmine about how like a company might follow up with you and your work. I guess just from like a perspective of whether or not the work that they wanted to do with you was meaningful or not. So I guess I'm just curious about what kind of ways that they have engaged with you after the fact in order to ensure that like the engaging with a minority-owned business is meaningful and it's not just to check a box or a requirement.
Jasmine, do you have an answer for that?
Make sure that I heard you correctly. You said, have any companies followed up with me after the fact to say, hey, wow, your work was really great. I'm so glad you were on that project with us. Is that correct?
And he said, did they ask you for their, like give them a rating? Like, how did we support you in your work? Like, do you,
are we just doing our job and checking a box, or are we being genuine and really making it work?
Yes, that.
So never, ever has anyone ever said, how did we do? How did you like working with us? Period. So there's that.
Yeah. I was going to say, I haven't heard of that, but that's something that could be, I think that's something that should be implemented. Like, how well are organizations working with minority companies? That's a very good point there. And I think that's something that should be considered. Yeah. Yeah. Like they should get a minority scorecard for minority businesses. James seconds that too.
Susan Norris has a question. Susan, can you feel free to turn on your camera if you like. Susan, are you still there?
And I was going to say, right before you go, Susan, I was going to say, and so Bobby Robertson, he has a company called Client Confident. Is that what it is? Client Confident and Confidant, and that's what he does. He can go to, and he does these interviews where he truly helps both parties to understand their benefits, etc. So he does that work. But no one has willingly come.
And it sounds like Susan might be having some issues.
I got it. I'm sorry. It wasn't letting me.
We're all
It
set.
wasn't letting me unmute myself. You were in my control. I was in your control, Reuben. Hi, I love this conversation. This is kind of a near and dear thing to my heart. I am not a woman of color, but I am a woman in this industry. And I think that there are so many opportunities. One is I love this idea of getting to the kids early. One of the things that I think is also a critical component, which is kind of sad to say, but the companies that hire people do background checks. And if they don't start now thinking about that background. I was trying to hire a lot of field workers in Colorado Springs at one point in time in my career, and almost 90% of the workers I was not able to hire because they had to drive on the job and they had moving violations in their background. So it can be as simple as that. So like, keep it clean, guys, because it affects your career later is one of the things. And also I put a note in here. I've done some work with this company called Empower, this nonprofit that helps prepare people for interviews, prepare people for public speaking, mentoring them, and that type of thing. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for people in industry to just be there for people who are being proactive about their, these people are people who are diving in to be proactive about moving forward in their career or getting started in their career. And I'm excited to be able to hopefully help them along. And then the third thing I wanted to say is related to the last comment about, like, has anybody ever asked, how you did or what you thought? I think both ways, you as a company going in as a minority women-owned business, working with utility companies or in energy, to go to them and say, it's really important to advance us. We need to get your feedback. What's one thing we could do better? What's one thing that we did well? You got to be proactive, because I worked for a utility company for 13 years and we never got surveys from our vendors to say, how do we do? And so I'm like, that would be awesome for them to hear. And the last thing I'll say is, kudos to enabling the workforce. I think we focus a lot on more of the weatherization type, more blue collar work, but there is a lot of need to hire skilled workers in contact centers that need to know technology. They need to know how to navigate a computer. They need to know how to type and have good grammar, because the chat functionality, chatting with customers, is becoming a big thing. And I was just on a conference call panel a couple of weeks ago where staffing resources, they're starting to think about, can they type? And do they use good grammar when they type? And I think that's a fascinating pivot.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And thank you so much, Susan. And so one of the points that you said, I wanted to highlight, so that's a great example of the systematic racism that we're talking about. So when you said, hey, background checks, these are an issue. So understandable, that's an issue, but that's where we go to the system and say, okay, well, let's look at these programs. Should we be expunging these? How long ago was that? Were you in your youth? Was that a mistake? Is this your character? Just things like that, where we can say, hey, let's look at this, because it's extremely easy to be pulled over while black. And that's it, and that's the end, and I can't get a job. And so all of the things you said, absolutely great. It's just that we can think about them and the solutions in a at the system level as well.
Absolutely. And let's go back to the policies behind, y'all policy people on the phone. Those are the part of the policies that we're talking about as well. How do we ensure that once we develop these people in these jobs, that we can get them to work? Are there, if there's not a workaround, which we don't always want workarounds, how can we truly help people? People with records want to work and take care of their families too, right?
I'm going to jump in here for a second and note that it's we're at the hour. If Pamela and Jasmine, do you have to go, or can you give us 1 to 5 more minutes to address 1 or 2 more questions?
I can say.
All right. Thank you everybody for tuning in. If you have to go, you have to go. But I'm just we have 2 more questions in the queue here, and let's see if we can get to them. Is it Jorge or George Moreno? Can you unmute? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to share your knowledge with everyone. Yeah, my name is Jorge Moreno. Just a question about communication strategies, like talking about outreach to the communities. What are some of the key ways to have maybe a regional or local strategy to bring people in and get them interested? I know you talked a little bit about the K through 12 aspect, but in my programs that I'm developing, I'm looking at, immigrants, underrepresented groups, trying to find creative ways, going to churches or the YMCA. What are some other ideas that you've implemented that maybe I can kind of take as some inspiration?
So, and Jasmine can jump in and answer this too, but I will say that working with nonprofits who focus on re-engaging people with work. Someone mentioned earlier your Urban League. Urban League is one of them. You also have, there are, just one-off, I don't know everyone in every state, but I know that there are several in Georgia. I know there's several. I'm doing a workforce development project in Connecticut. I know they have several agencies there. Their local SNAP program there has a workforce component built in where all SNAP participants are eligible for free training, on-the-job training. If the SNAP program in your state, Department of Social Services, offers job training to their participants, can you imagine who would come out for, how many people could possibly come out for just even a discussion about those opportunities, or even having a discussion with your local Department of Social Services about what type of programming is available? That right there, that's one thing I'm helping talk to them, with them through, and working with their utility, is talking through that exact thing. Like, is there a way that we could implement, and what kind of program would be most successful? Is it getting people trained on HVAC? Is it getting people trained on to become electricians? Is it, what does that look like? So, being really creative about the process and how you do it, and working with the local agencies that are already doing this work is really what's the key. Because trust me, that you have local agencies there that are already trying to get people employed.
No, I love it. And so you said specifically working with like the immigrant communities. Did you say so college or grown people as well? Like these are the different levels you were talking about. Okay, yeah. So you did say you started it. You're like, going with these community organizations as well. And it is the best approach that I found is the grassroots approach. Period. And so going to the carnival and having a booth there and talking to people, but aside from that, and every single thing that Pam has said, I also think that the finding a champion. So going to Atlanta, there is a really up and down Buford Highway. It's like International Highway, and so having a champion. Is there a market? And having someone in those different communities that speak that language that you can educate and say, okay, great. So we're doing this. You understand it fully. Great, please go in and tell these people, or can you do the presentation at the fair or at the whatever, but getting these champions, because it's education. That is the issue. It's not that they don't want to be involved in electrification of their city or anything like that. They don't know. So I think that's excellent. And then obviously getting the kids, because what we are finding, and part of the reason, not the whole reason, but that we're starting with the kids, is that they take it home. they take that piece of paper home. They say, Mom, turn off the light, like whatever it is. But there is a start there where they say, well, let me see. And then they get that information.
I think some implementers started giving like the energy kits out at schools for kids to take home with the light bulb and the shower head and the aerator for your sink, and that was helping kids kind of even educate their parents about energy saving. So yes, identifying how kids can step in and be the educator is great too. And then we find too, it's been proven, if you educate them early on and give them, those kids were great. If you give them those tools early on, and they know that these opportunities are out there for them, then that can also kind of spur something in them that makes them want to have careers in this industry. So getting them to start talking about it, like my ideal would be for us to engage juniors and seniors in high school on trade jobs in this industry. How can we do that where we can get them? I don't know if you guys remember back in the day, we had workforce or work development study in high school, where you would take an hour, the last 2 hours of your day at school, and you could go to the job and get paid to work, like work study programs. I think that's what they were called. Anyway, that was in high school. Bring something like that to a high school where, juniors and seniors can start getting educated on becoming an electrician, becoming an HVAC person. We can get them apprenticeships. Then by the time they graduate high school, they're already in the field making good money and being able to support themselves. Like, I would love to see something like that, but it's going to take all of us pulling our efforts together to do all of this work, all of us. And the more that these kids do it, the more that we put effort into it, the more that we educate communities and shore up communities and make them healthy and whole, the better that we all will be in doing this work. That's the right path moving forward to do this work.
All right.
Excellent.
I hate to cut things off, but we really are kind of over time by a few minutes, and I know everybody's got things they have to do. So I just wanted to extend again a super special thank you to Pamela and Jasmine. It's been great having you. It's been a really engaged audience. So thanks for coming. And for everybody who's still on the line, please check out becconference.org and register for the Beck Conference before the end of the month when the price goes up. You'll hear more discussions like this and others having to do with behavior, energy, and climate change. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you all.